You'll only just contact all the cantors and have, oh, never mind.
Yeah, that was nice while it lasted, huh? Whoa. Good thing I wasn't in the chair.
Davening, I really like this Siegel better for davening purposes, but for learning and the commentary and everything else, the Lev Shalom is his best.
It is. I think it's a very hard thing to design a Siegel, so I have a certain amount of kavod for my colleague who did it, but I find the layout to be infuriating.
It's particularly in Shabbat and Chagim, because you have to flip through how loud where it is, and each festival is in a different place.
And it doesn't give you the proper instructions, right? So even if you know it pretty well, it's confusing, as Henry's been pointing out from day one.
The commentaries are phenomenal.
They are. And you can't really exhaust them. Hey, Dave.
Shabbat Shalom, James.
Little Tony.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hey, Ben. Beth, are you teaching? Beth, summarize it. When we minionate, do you want to daven?
Sure.
Hi, Joe and David. We're just waiting for two more to start Minyan, so thanks for your patience. Yeah, don't you?
A great teaching. You didn't even invent it. How would you do it? Doing better today. She can see you.
No, time I'm playing the
Shabbat shalom. Late Tuesday. I think that's the only way to get a ticket. Just trying to leave for Wednesday, return on Sunday to get the ticket.
Sunday's gonna be easier. Unfortunately, I know how Sunday.
Your board's reading there.
Hi, Tayable Shabbat Shalom. We're just waiting for one more. If you can make it on time, you could be the 10th.
Can't count the Torah, huh?
The Javi? Yeah. As a couple therapist? Yeah. Well, if she did share on me. Put her on the spot, make sure she was paying attention.
You spoke. Don't recall.
There's a Shabbos bris today? Because I didn't know till I walked in the building.
Same. Didn't know quite well.
That's so fun.
Who has the bris?
He gets a rental.
What's the central place? Reason for Christ.
Sharp knives.
Is this the first one at this time?
Last week may have been pretty close to 4 also. They're getting earlier. I think the earliest we hold minutes was like 3:50 or something.
3:50 or 3:45, because the evening meeting is going from 4:45 to 4:30.
Yeah.
And it's usually 15 minutes before the evening meeting. That will be challenging. By the time people get home, if they have a nice Shabbat lunch and a quick snooze, they have to hurry to get here on time.
That's what we're seeing right now. Hector, you want to convert? You probably know it all.
Where's your sharp knife?
Howard.
He knows all the patients.
But then he can't help us. He can't do work. Hey, Gary. Shabbat Shalom. We're waiting for one more. It was nice seeing Benji in shul today. Can't hear you, but I'm sure you're saying something nice.
Now I'm there. Yeah, I had no idea he was there. Fine. He's doc sitting someplace.
He showed up. He's a good boy. He showed up for shul. I think it's done. The bris is done. All right, in a minute, I think we'll start whether or not we have a minion because time is ticking. Rabbi Tony's out there trying to find a Jew.
There were a couple that walked by while I was going into the lot, but I don't think that they would come in.
No, it's their loss.
Yeah.
We have occasionally had people
If
walk
I
in.
knew there was gonna be a problem, I would have dragged Nora.
There's always a problem.
Homelessly on Shabbos afternoon. I thought Shabbos afternoon was a strong
It
habit.
was pre-COVID. It's been okay post pre-COVID open, but it's not like 19, so if not everyone comes, it's 15. It's more like 13, so if not everyone comes, sometimes it's 9.
Maybe you get the meeting after.
Shabbos, I just, my memory is that Shabbos afternoon is a strong community and there's lots of people here to eat and study. And then sometimes people drift out before Mari. That certainly is not gonna happen today.
It was for many, that was the case for many, many years.
But it's also this one because it's so early. When it's at 6 or 6:30, people have eaten, they rested, and they say, okay, now I can come on out and do this. This early, they're still in the eat and rest phase.
Because when I was planning this, Minyan will end and there'll still be more than an hour till the one LA program starts.
We needed to do that, we got time to set it up.
We'll wait long enough, we can have them go to Minha. We'll do Minha at 9 tonight.
The issue with Minha is you gotta start the Forest Service, and that's self-employed.
And
We
the
can
normal
always read from the
phone
plans, but it's
list
not the same thing.
doesn't work
But
on
I'm with
Shabbos
I'm
because
with
everybody
Brandon
turn
about
their phone off. I haven't.
44
That's fine, sleep just as good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Too big of a office, but, maybe 3 days.
Yeah, you eat more than you think you do. Oh, yeah, I don't think so.
You know, like, once a month I'll.
Oh, I just said, I don't know how many.
3 days,
been
like,
here
back
for
to
one
where I was.
before, but USC to CLA is today.
It's only at 5, so. That was good going down. No,
Yeah.
you can still see half the game.
I know, we'll have you start, but it's gonna be
But it'll be truncated.
not a whole lot of stuff for you to do.
Okay.
I can handle that.
Okay, we don't have a minion, but we're gonna start Ashrei and the Lev Shalem is 2:14. If you have the Slim Shalom at home, 226.
Ashrei shevetecha, Ashrei shevetecha, Odia lucha sela, Shagachalo, Ashram Shonai Elohav, Tila David. Tilatna yedar bepi, vivarecha basashem kot shalelam vaed, vanachna echyam et aviad alam, hallelujah, uval Tzion goel. ואתה קדוש ישבתי לישראל, וקרא זה ואמר, קדוש קדוש קדוש, ענת צבא מלוך על הארץ כבודו. ותישאני רוח ושמך אל ראש גדול, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. תיתנם ליעקב חסד לאברהם, אשר נשבעת על אבותינו מימי קדם. ויבדחו בחיידי שמך, כי לא עזבת דשך אדוני, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה ויאדיר.
So we're still without a minyan, so we'll, in lieu of a formal Torah service, I'll just lay in the verses out of Chumash that we're about to study a little bit. Page 146 in the Eitz Chaim, chapter 25 of the book of Genesis, starting with verse 19. And then then we'll study some Torah after the Amidah. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam asher kedushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'yeh todo Yitzchak ben Avraham. Avraham olidei Yitzchak. Vayhi Yitzchak ben 40 shana bekachto Rivka. Bat Betuel Arami mipadan Aram achot Lavan Harami lo lisha. Vayatar Yitzchak l'Adonai lenochach ishto ki akara hi. Vayater lo Adonai vatahar Rivka ishto. Vayirotus v'abanim bekirba. Vatomer imkein lama ze anochi batelech lidrosh et Adonai. Vayomer Adonai la shnei goyim bevidnech ushnei lu'umim mimayach yiparedu ulam yilom yematz v'rav yavod sa'ir vayimlu yamei laderet b'nei tamim bevidna vayitzer rishon amoni kulo kaderet se'ar vayikru shemo Esav v'acharei chen yatsa achiv Ve'ado cheze be'ekev Esav vayikra shemo Yaakov v'Yitzchak ben 60 shana v'ledototam vayigdalu haneharim vayhi Esav ish Yodei Atzayed ish Sadeh v'Yaakov ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim v'Yehav Yitzchak Esav Kitzayed b'Fiv v'Rivka hevet et Yaakov v'Yazed Yaakov Nazid v'Yavo Esav min hasadeh v'hu ayef v'Yomer Esav el Yaakov Halitei na min Adom Hadom hazeh ki ayef anochi al ken kara shemo Edom v'Yomer Yaakov michrach hayom et b'choretcha li Vayomer Esav hinei anochi holech lamud b'lamazeli anu bechora. Vayomer Yaakov hishavali kayom vayishavalo. Vayimkor et bechorato liYaakov. V'Yaakov natan leEsav lechem nuzid adashim vayochal vayesh vayakom vayelech vayibes Esav et habechora vayihi ra'ab ba'aretz milvad hara'av harishon asher haya b'mer Avraham vayelech Yitzchak. Elimelech melech plishtim gerara vayirai elav Adonai vayomer al ter mitzrayim hashachon ba'aretz asher amar elecha gur ba'aretz hazod ve'yeh imcha v'avarchaka ki lecha lezaracha etein et kol ha'aratzot ha'el b'kimoti et hashvua asher nishbati l'Avraham le'avicha Abraham avicha b'hir beiti et zaracha kechochvei hashemayim v'natati lezaracha et kol ha'aratzot ha'el v'hitbarchu v'zaracha kol goyei ha'aretz Kevasher Shema Abraham Bekoli Vayishmored Mishmarti Mitzvotai Chukotai Vetorotai. Do we now have a minyan?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, so we can do Kaddish. So Chatzi Kaddish in the Lev Shalem. In the Slim Shalom 233 in the Lev Shalem. 222 in the Lev Shalem. Please rise.
יתגדל ויקדש והבא, בעמד יבקרו תבן לכברכותי, בחייכון ובימיכון וחייכו בישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב עמו, אמן. איש ברבב ורח ללב ולמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר וידמם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמר קדושה בריחו, לעילא מן כה ברכתה ושבתה, תושבתה ונחמתה, דבן בעלמא ועמו, אמן.
Yeah, Midah said in a quiet whisper beginning 223 in the Lev Shalem, 234 in the Slim Shalom. Till davening, please keep davening your own pace. We're beginning the repetition 223, Lev Shalem, 234, Slim Shalom.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Eloi Avotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzhak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor VaNorah Eloyon Gomer Chasadim Tovim V'konei HaKol V'zoher Chasdei Avot U'mevigo Elivnei V'nehem L'man Shmo B'Yava Melech Ozer V'Kedah Moshiach Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham V'Ketzara אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מלחם יתערב להושיע, משיב הרוח מיראת השם, מכלכל חיים בחסד מלחם ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים והופך חולים ומצהיר אסורים, מקיים את לשני עפר, מחמוך בר גבורות ומדם מלך, מלך מימינו מצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב היה נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר. קדוש, 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 ענת צבאו, מלך כל הארץ כבודו, למעתם ברוך יאמרו. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, דברי קודשך כתוב לאמור. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור אדוני גודלך, לנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, בשבחך אלוהינו, מבינו למוש לעולם ועד, כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. אתה אחד ושמך אחד, מכם חסר גוי אחד בארץ, תפארת גדולה ועצרת ישועה, יום מנוחה הקדש וקדושה לעמך נתת, אברהם יגל, יצחק ירנן, יעקב ובניו ינוחו בו, מנוחת אהבה ונדבה, מנוחת אמת ואמונה, מנוחת שלום ושובע והשקט והבטח, מנוחה שלמה שאתה רוצה בה, יכירו בניך וידעו כי מעידך כי מנוחתם, ועל מנוחתם יקדישו את שמך, אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, עצב במנוחתנו, קדשנו במצוותיך. ותן חלקנו בתורתך, סבנו מטובך, ושמחנו בישועתך, וטהר ליבנו לעבדך באמת, והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו, באהבה ורצון שבת קודשך, וינוחו בה ישראל מקדשי שמך, ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת. ויצא אדוני אלוהינו, ומחסו את תפילתם, והשבת אדוני לבי ביתך, תפילתם ותקבל ברצון, ותהי לרצון תמיד עבדי ישראל עמך, ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, המחזיר שכינתו לציון, מודים אנחנו לך. הטוב קילוך לרחמך, ורחם גילותם השדך, מעולם קיווינו לך. ועל כולם יפרח וידרם שמך מלכנו, תמיד לעולם ועד. וכל יודוך סלע, ויהללו את שמך באמת, העיר שבתנו עזרתנו סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך לכן ההודות. שלום רב ישראל עמך, ועל כל יושבי תבל תשים לעולם, כי כתוב מלך אדון לכל השלום, וטוב בעיניך. לברך לך ישראל בכל עת וכל שעה בשלומך. ברוך אתה אדוני, Yisrael b'shalom.
Tzidkatcha, top of 230.
Tzidkatcha tzedek le'olam, v'todcha emet, v'tzidkatcha Elohim ad marom, asher situ gedolot, Elohim mi kamocha, tzidkatcha garel, mishpatecha tehom rabah, Adam u'vema toshia Adonai.
Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא תברכותיהם לכמלכותי בחייכון וביומייכון וחייתך בישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב עמו, אמן. יש ברבה ברוך לעולם ולעולמי הוויה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתמם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי לקודשה וכו' לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבתה ונחמתה דרמן בעלמא ועמו, אמן. תתגבר צלתו ברכות לכל ישראל, כאדם לשמיא ועמו, אמן. יהי שלום רב מן שמיא וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועמו, אמן. עושה שלום עממה והוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועמו, אמן.
Please rise for Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Kaddish Atom.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומייכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ועמו, אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיא. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה לאמירן בעלמא ועמו, אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיא וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועמו, אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועמו, אמן.
Eshkoch Alan, those who are here in person, come get food. Those who are watching live, go get food wherever you are. Charge it to us. And while you're getting food and drink, come take a text sheet. There are 2 pages, and Zoomers will be back in about 8 minutes or so to start the teaching.
Hey, can you know how to raise these blinds?
Stay and clearly didn't do that. So I'm gonna tell you, my mom might be. No, actually, it's time to finish.
I thought about that, but then it was good that I had a moment with my mom.
I have dentist was 2002. Very, proud of that.
The bigger electronic opportunity of life, the first one that really make it for you. And then I'll tell these people that you,
You can have another one, thank you, Ben.
But anyway, I looked up the years, he's now in my house. Yes, yes, that was my international community. Yeah. She died in November 2019.
Yeah.
But they have one.
He's a brother up there.
And on Monday, if it works, and on Tuesday,
Yeah, they
service.
took over old gated property up on the hill. Yeah, and they, you're right, it's the same restaurant, same owner, same chef. And it's, they have like a beautiful city and
Oh. Gee.
Zoomers, the text sheet was in the Shabbat email. Should be a link to a Google Doc there. Hi Heather, Shabbat Shalom.
As long as they use it originally.
There's a shopping center, they're very tough for this land.
Wow, what a beautiful idea. So your mom is from LA?
No, from San Francisco.
Oh, and she came all the way to see you?
Yeah.
May God bless us there.
Trying to think the last time I saw him. It's not that long ago.
As well as can be expected.
No, but
Right here.
he had a youngish wife.
There, did I move over once? No. That's just where it was.
Right. Thanks for trying.
Walking by, I haven't seen Bob in a while.
Okay, we'll get started. Continue to get food if you like. I'm going to put my watch down. Pretty much everything that we're going to look at is on the sheet, but since we have the Chumashim in front of us, do we still have the Chumashim in front of us? We can look at a little bit more of the context of that first verse. So if you have a Chumash, open it up to 146, 147. This is really going to be a deep dive into one word. Occasionally that's the way I like to teach, just really going into as many layers as possible in this pluripotent Hebrew that each word seems to have so many different potential associations. And the word is the word that connects Yaakov and his brother Esau from birth, and I will posit, is still connecting their descendants until this day. And the question is, what are we, the descendants of Yaakov, supposed to do with this word? In what way can it be active? Should it be active, or should it be excised from our spiritual vocabulary when we think about we as the descendants of Yaakov and whoever we imagine are the descendants of Esau? So to remind yourself, if you go back to page 147, verse 23, so if you're in a different Chumash at home, chapter 25 of Breshit, verse 23, Vayomer Adonai La, God said to her here is Rivka, who was upset and distressed because of the battling that was taking place in her womb between these twins. Shnei goyim bevitnech, you've got two nations in your beten, in your belly, in your womb. Ushnei leumim, leum is another word for nation, two peoples. Mim me'ayech hiparedu, will burst forth from your innards. Ulaom milom yamatz, one will be stronger than the other. And then a three-word phrase, which we're not going to focus on, but in and of itself is interesting. The Rav Ya'avod Sa'ir, which seems to suggest that the older one will serve the younger, but it could also mean that the younger one will serve the over. The younger one depends on where you put the comma, but leave that aside. Verse 24, Vayim le'u yameh laledet, her days were complete for birth. V'hinei tomim bevina, and behold, God was right, there were indeed twins in her belly. Vayitzeh rishon admoni, first one came out red, admon like adom. Kulo ka'aderet se'ar, all of him was like a big mantle of hair. Vayikru shemo Esav, and they called him Esav. V'yacharechen, and afterwards, Yatsa achiv, his brother came out. Interesting that from the very first time that we meet Yaakov, we are introduced to him as a brother. That's what he is. But it's interesting that he is identified in reference to Esav, right? He doesn't come out on his own. He comes out as a brother. V'yado ochezet ba'akev Esav. Yado, his hand. Ochezet, present tense, is grasping. Ba'akev, on the akev, untranslated for the moment, of Esav. So the picture in our mind, right, if you've ever been in a delivery room or you can imagine it, what do you picture? That Esav is already born. Here comes a second one, only referenced right now as a brother, and his hand is doing what? Grabbing the heel, right? Because akev, one of the many things that akev means, could be heel, right? So it's almost as if they were born like Siamese, but not connected by tissue, but there was no separation between them. They were born as one, right? So Esav is out, but the moment that Esav is out, Yaakov is already out-ish, because if he's holding on to Esav's ankle, then Yaakov's hand was born with Esav's body, okay? And for the moment, suspend your disbelief. We want to read this both as the Torah's truth and as some kind of an archetype for us to understand, right? We are being introduced right now to the man who we know, and the Torah already knew by now, was going to be the future of the Jewish people, the namesake of the Jewish people. And so we're being taught something, right? Very intentional about what Yisrael, who's going to emerge from Yaakov, is supposed to be about, right? The Torah goes on to say, Vayikra shmo Yaakov, and he called him Yaakov. Who's the he? Presumably Yitzchak, because Vayikra is masculine, and it's not a passive verb. It doesn't say his name was called, which then you could lead to say, well, they discussed it and they decided together, Yaakov. He called him Yaakov. Any other possibilities? God. Right? The only other male-ish voice in the scene is the Holy One. Maybe God gives the name. Hold on to that thought. That's one of the commentators' answers. And then we learn kind of a piece of information at the very end, which is not significant to our discussion, but we never are supposed to read half a verse. So we'll finish the verse. V'yitzchak ben shishim shana b'lidatam. And Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. We don't know how old Rivka was. Okay. Let's go back to verse 25. Verse 26. What is your image of the scene, and or what do you think we're supposed to be pulling from this scene? Why is this a significant thing for us to be told that the man who is Yaakov, who's going to become Yisrael, is holding on to the Akev, the heel of Esav? And there is a microphone down there, so if you want to pass it around. Who's got a thought? What's it stand for and why? No wrong answers. It'd be a very quick shiur. What does it mean to you? What does it mean?
Closely connected.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Okay, so interesting. Heather's first answer. We may not be able to get the microphone around quickly enough, so I'll repeat. Right. So Heather's first answer is wonderfully counter the narrative that we're about to know, that it's helpful to try to forget a little bit in order to understand the text as it was. Right. Heather said they're connected. Right. Why is that wonderful? Because we know that the thrust of the Torah after this, and the Midrashic thrust, is that the grasping does not seem to be a connection, intimacy, but a competition. But if you just look at the scene, right, they were born hugging-ish, right? And in fact, so much you could say, why is he called Yaakov? Because he wants to be near his brother. He's holding on to his brother's Akev. One possibility. Ben?
This comes from a sense of living in a Western tradition, which would also post-date roughly when this text is coming out. But there's, to me, I think of heel and I think of Achilles' heel, that there's some sort of like Yaakov is his brother's weakness to a certain extent from the minute they're born.
Good. So Ben is connecting this to the Greek mythology, which is a little bit contemporaneous with at least rabbinic midrash, right? That a heel is a weakness, right? Or at least it was for Achilles. And so Yaakov, by grasping on his brother's heel, he is representing his weakness, representing his potential downfall. Okay. Anyone else before we look at the next verse? Okay, so hold those two thoughts in your mind. If you are a more than occasional shul goer, then when you hear the word Akev, the heel of Esav, and you hear the name Yaakov, your mind might be thinking about another use of that root. And let's go to the towards the end of the Torah, the third parsha of the book of Devarim, because we have this word there as well. We actually have a parsha named after it. It's not named thematically, it's named because that's the first significant word in the verse. But this is the first verse of Parshat Akev. On the sheets, it's the second root, the second source. If you're from home and you don't have the sheet in front of you, if you have a Tanakh, it's Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 12. God says, Vehaya, and it will be, Akev tishma'un et hamishpatim ha'ela. Very hard to actually translate the word Akev in the sentence, certainly if you're translating it having to do with a body part. And it will be, heel if you listen to my commandments, foot if you pay attention to my rules, right? It's hard to make sense of. We have some idiomatic expressions in English that work, on the heels of, right? Or it follows that. So it could be that in ancient Hebrew, as in modern English, the word that means this part of the body ends up being related to causation, or at least to the order of things, right? It will be following that on the heels of your observing the mishpatim, ushmartem basitem otam, and if you guard them and you do them, what's going to happen as a result? The fact that you have done this, v'shamar Adonai Elohecha lecha tabrit v'tachesed, then God in turn will protect for you the covenant that he made with you and all of the righteousness that he swore to your ancestors. Turn the page, go to the next source. This is Rashi's famous, at least for some, famous commentary on Akev, where he, without mentioning our parsha, is definitely connecting to it, at least etymologically, because saying Akev does not here mean an idiomatic on the heels of following that, but Akev here means heel. It actually means the part of the foot. How? V'haya Akev tishma'un, and it will be that if you listen to the Akev, that's how you actually can translate the phrase grammatically. In other words, instead of Rashi saying Akev as kind of like an adverb, if you or not even an adverb, like a connecting word, following that, you're listening to the commandments, Rashi says, V'haya tishma'un Akev. If you pay attention to the Akev, to the foot, in what way? Im hamitzvot kalot she'adam dash ba'akevav tishma'un. if those light mitzvot, those ones that no one pays attention to, that you are liable either consciously or unconsciously, intentionally or unintentionally, to trample with your feet, if you follow those, then I'm going to be with you. God, as if God is saying, I know you're going to follow the big ones. I know you're not going to bow down to idols. I know you're probably not going to do, child sacrifice. But that's not what this covenant is based on. Transmute this into any relationship that you want to, right? Yeah, I trust that you're not going to commit adultery. I trust that you're not going to, murder our children. But that's not what this marriage is based on. This marriage is based on the small things, the things that you might convince yourself are not significant. It's the resting on the laurels, assuming there's enough connectivity tethering us together, and that's going to make this love last forever, person to person, or God to Israel. If you look at the things or the moments that you would be liable to tread on with your akev, if you pay attention to where your foot is falling and choose not to put your foot there, you're about to step and realize, oh no, this is a delicate moment. No one's watching. This is not one of the big ones, but this is a delicate thing that I'm going to trample. If I choose to put my foot somewhere else and not use my foot to trample on it, then God says to Israel, our relationship has a chance. And again, person to person, then the people whom we want to share any sorts of love within our lives might be around longer because we'll have earned it by treading lightly. Okay? So in this commentary, Rashi is using the word akev to mean actually foot. If you're in my Rashi class, we all the time discuss, does Rashi actually think that that's what the verse means? Or is Rashi importing a midrash and selling it to you as pshat, as the simple reading of the text, but he knows that you know that he knows that it's a midrash? And we don't know, because we can't interview Rashi, right? In general, we think of Rashi as a pashtan, right? He tries to deliver the plainest meaning of the text. It doesn't seem right that Rashi would think that this is actually what God meant in the verse, but that's what Rashi is actually offering up to us, okay? Now, Rashi is not 100% internally consistent, not even 80% internally consistent. So when you look at Rashi in a commentary over there, and then you compare it with a commentary over here, don't necessarily expect them to always line up with each other. Now I want to read Rashi on our verse, right? Rashi on the first time the root akev has been brought into the Torah. Just to remind you, we have been reading Rashi on Dvarim. So this is the next commentary. On the phrase ba'akev Esav, on the heel of Esav. Siman, this is a sign. This is a premonition. She'ein ze maspik ligbor malchuto, that this one is barely going to have finished his reign, his dominion. Who's this one? Who's he referring to so far? Esav. Ad shezeh, until this one, Yaakov, the heel grabber, Omeid, will stand up, Vinotla, and will take it. What's the it? Dominion. Hemenu, from him. Okay. How is Rashi in this verse reading the word akev in our verse, and what does he think it means? He's seeing it as a prophecy, that their birth is a prophecy that's going to say something about the end of days, or at least what's going to happen far in the future between the descendants of these two people. How is it being read, Sheva?
He's using the sequential, on the heels of. So as soon as Akev has his time, right on the heels of that, Yaakov will come to power.
Right, just as Esav was born first and Yaakov is right there, so Esav will, he's not saying it, but he means it, die first. His ascendancy will come first, and his descent will come first. And when Esav descends, guess who will be there standing on the top of the mountain, having held on to his brother the entire way? Israel. Now, remember when Rashi is writing and in what historical context Rashi is living. Rashi is living in pre-Crusader or Crusader France. A significant amount of Rashi's literature is dripping, pun intended, with the blood of martyrs and with Christendom, which in the Jewish ideal is the descendant of Esav. How? Esav becomes the father of Edom in the Torah. Edom gets traced in the rabbinic literature to Rome, and Rome becomes the Christian empire. Like world historians might not draw those connections, but we do, right? So when we see Christianity, we see that when Crusader
era French medieval Jews saw the Pope, they saw Esav. And when they read Parshat Toldot, they saw the Pope. And the Pope back then was not the Pope of today, right? The Pope back then was destroying Jewish villages and raping Jewish women and killing Jewish babies, not personally, but theologically, essentially, right? And so what's Rashi doing here? Rashi's saying, you, reader, are seeing Esav being born first. You're seeing Yaakov holding on to him. That might look like a desperate act, like, constantly trying to follow him. But if you constantly try to follow someone, you're going to follow them on the way up. You're also going to be up when that one eventually goes down. This is a probably psychologically feel-good supersessionist idea that, oh, Israel, you're at the bottom now. We're still holding on to Yaakov's foot, but one day we'll be at the top of the mountain. And he's pulling that all out of this scene and out of what he's looking at and seeing outside of his window. Questions, comments on that? The mic will never possibly get to the speaker on time. Go ahead.
Is there a phrase that says, as long as Jacob is strong, Esau will be subservient?
What Bob said was, say that again.
As long as Jacob is strong, Esau will be subservient. Isn't there a phrase? Isn't there a Torah?
Well,
does it say that in the Torah?
Right. So
It seems to say the opposite.
the Torah says that phrase "v'rav ya'avod tza'ir," which we said in the very beginning, could either mean the older one will serve the younger one. It could also mean the younger one will serve the older one. But it's certainly a fantasy that eventually Jacob's strength, Yaakov's strength, Israel's strength will be present, and they can't be strong at the same time, right? But we see this playing out even to this day, right? There's article after article, for good reason, about Jewish power, Jewish wielding of authority and hegemony in the land of Israel, and some of the battles playing out in Knesset right now has to do. It's more Yaakov. It's more Yitzchak Yishmael than Yaakov Esav, but only one of us can hold on to dominion at the same time. It's a biblical prophecy, right? One of us is always holding on to the other one's heel, right? And if we're not the one wielding power, then we're the ones who are the butt of someone else's power, and we've been that way for too long. And however you vote and whatever you think about the politics, these are very old tropes, and the Jews have been on the wrong side of it for most of our history, right? So there's old wisdom in some, even the most extreme of the positions that are being represented by politicians today.
But isn't, I mean, when it says strong, it means devoted to God, to keeping the Torah.
So hold that thought, because the last commentary we'll look at, we'll come back to that, okay? So hold that thought. Look at the next source, Sforno. Sforno is an Italian commentator, a couple of hundred years after Rashi, living under markedly different circumstances, right? So to be a Jew in Italy in, I think it's the 16th, maybe 15th century, was not nearly as challenging, not nearly as subject to the whims of the local Christian hegemon as it was if you were living in Rashi's time. And so you don't see nearly the same kind of inferiority complex that gets transmuted into a superiority complex in Sforno's commentary as you do in Rashi's. What does Sforno say? Vayikra Shemo Yaakov. His name was called Yaakov. Remember we asked the question before, who gave him the name? Sforno's going to read it as if God gave him the name, not his father. Yishaer ba'ekev uvasof. I want to translate those three words very carefully. This is also a prediction, and what does it mean? He will remain. Who's the he? Jacob. Ba'ekev. He will remain at the end, at the tail, right? So heel, if someone is running, the heel is at the end, right? So if you're at someone's heels, you're behind them. He, Yaakov, will remain behind, but not behind in the sense of losing the race, meaning he'll be the last one standing. Uvasof. He will always be there. Ki zeh horeh heyot yado ochezet ba'akev achiv. This is the teaching that comes to the fact that he's constantly holding on to the heel of his brother. It's a similar similar understanding of Rashi. At the end of the race, it's not that he will have been behind and crossed the line afterwards. He will be the last one standing. Shekvar Amruzal, because our sages said, Ha'el Yitbarach Karalo Kain, and Sforno he refers to a midrash. You can see a little bit more of the midrash in the English. This is the English translation of Sforno's commentary from Sfaria, and for some reason the English commentary kind of expands on it. The Hebrew doesn't have that there, but basically Sforno was quoting a midrash that basically brings the verse from the 46th chapter of Jeremiah. You see it there in English, where Jeremiah prophesies, I will make an end of all nations, meaning eventually the Hittites and the Hivites and the Jebusites and Rome and Greece will eventually, the sun will set on them. And this is pretty remarkable. We can say this as Jews in the 21st century, but I will not make an end of you, right? Mark Twain noticed that amazingness, and we should notice it as well, that many, if not most of the people that have once had dominion over us are no longer as an individuated nation, and we remain. Sforno would say, see, I told you so. And the Torah told you so as well. Up until now, these commentaries seem to be reading the birth of Esav and Yaakov as predicting a future that is not in Jacob's hands per se, it's determined by God. That their birth suggested that Esav would come first, he would come onto the stage first, Jacob is right behind him, and Esav will eventually leave the stage and Jacob will remain through none of our merit. Nothing got mentioned so far in these commentaries that suggests that we have to work towards this, we have to aspire toward this, we have to perspire towards this. It's just the way of the world, right? That in the birth of these twins, their eventual situation and Esav's eventual demise was predicted, so was Jacob's eventual ascent. With me so far? Final text. Commentary that I'd never come across before. I always love finding teachers and sages from the past that I had never met. This is a commentary called the Kanfei Nisharim, the wings of eagles. You know that phrase, one of the ways that it was described, God's saving us from Egypt was described. Rabbi Avram Lichtenstein, he lived in Poland in the 18th century. Lichtenstein is a pretty common name. I have no idea if he's related to the prominent religious Zionist Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, who is the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat in the Gush until his death about 6 or 7 years ago. It could just be that it's the same name, but if you know 20th and early 21st century Israeli Judaism, the name Rabbi Lichtenstein rings a bell, but I don't know if they're related. What does he say? And there are going to be parts of this commentary which I think are going to properly make us a little bit uncomfortable, but I think there are parts of this commentary that are worth retrieving and restoring. Ma she'esav dash ba'akavav. The very thing that Esav would trample with his feet. Remember Rashi on Parshat Ekev, that this notion of the heel is the heel grinding down things that don't matter. Jacob comes out holding the Esav's Ekev as if to say, that very thing that my older brother is not going to pay attention to, and he's going to trample. And for example, what? Mevazeh umizalzel begufei Torah. This guy Esav and his descendants is going to be demeaning and disparaging the principal ideas of Torah, obviously, because he's not a Jew, and they're not going to be Israelites. B'mitzvot v'masim tovim. Now we're hurling critiques, all sort of characterological critiques on the descendants of Esav. Not only are they not going to follow the principles of Torah, they're not going to do mitzvot, they're not even going to do good deeds. You and I both know that Christians are just as capable of doing good works in the world as are Jews. This is not what Rabbi Lichtenstein is saying, that the descendants of Esav are somehow characterologically broken, as predicted by their ancestors' birth. The midot uva musar, and high character traits and ethics, all those things that all of the descendants of Esav are not going to care a whit about. Kol ela ochez Yaakov biado. All of those things, Jacob, the one who was born that way, is going to be grasping them in his hand to do what with them? What's that? To observe them, to lift them up, to make life more beautiful and more moral as a result of it, right? The parts that are uncomfortable about this is the broad sweep with which a Polish rabbi in the 18th century, who might have come by it honestly also, said all of the descendants of Esav are shmutz. And everywhere we look, we're seeing them trample the notion of Tzelem Elohim and the idea that people are born in the image of God, and they certainly don't treat the Jews very well. And anything that's descended from Esav and Edom and Roman culture and Christian culture ended up in licentiousness and in pogroms and not for the Jews, and there's no goodness in Christendom. I'm sure he would have said that to his kahal. We would not say that, right? But we understand why they would say it, right? We would. And it wasn't that long ago that was a common thing to hear from a pulpit in synagogue, and thank God we're not at that place, right? Although you can make the argument that maybe we are a little bit too comfortable with elements of the culture that have been handed to us not from Jewish tradition, but from secular tradition. But yes, Heather. Can we have the microphone?
Just wondering about this verb, the mizalzel. It's a 4-letter shoresh.
Yes.
And I thought those only occurred in more modern Hebrew. So is this from the 1700s?
Heather's asking about the root of the verb mizalzel. It's a 4-letter root, and she was asking whether or not that's more common in modern Hebrew. The answer is it's more common in modern Hebrew, but it's not. It doesn't not exist even in biblical Hebrew. Mizalzel, the core root of mizalzel is Zayin Lamed, and Zayin Lamed or Zayin Vav Lamed means cheap. Zol is cheapening. So lizalzel is to verily cheapen something, right? Sometimes when you had a 2-letter root that was turned into a 4-letter root, it was kind of an intensifier of that notion, and sometimes not. But our best guess is that to be mizalzel is to show the fact that you do not give reverence to something because you're cheapening it. Rabbi Chorny, Gainer Chorny, can someone throw the microphone over there?
I really like this teaching a lot in the context of some of the learning I've done over the years about how we once upon a time kept the Aseret HaDibrot in our Siddur, and then eventually wound up taking it out for the most part. Almost every single Siddur across the board, across the Jewish people, has now taken out the Aseret HaDibrot. And the reason that it was
Aseret
taken,
HaDibrot?
yeah, the idea that the 10 commandments came out of the Siddur was in response to the idea of this sort of mizalzeling of the commandments by the cultures around us, that there was a cheapening of commandments by the Christologically influenced cultures around us, that there was this idea of a broader ethic, but not of specific ways of behavior, and lest we believe that there were only 10 important rules by which one could live, we took that out of our Siddur as a part of our daily liturgy. And I'm thinking about that context and perhaps even that being a part of the discussion. I don't know where that was historically for the Polish Jewry and for Rav Lichtenstein's community, but I'm wondering if that's a piece of this story, is this idea that it's not so much that those people were terrible humans or behaved terribly in all instances, but rather that they trampled upon the notion that there were specific behaviors by which they were supposed to be living, or specific halachot beyond the mitzvot begadol, beyond the greater mitzvot, but specific behaviors by which we live, codes of law and codes of ethics.
Yeah. Thank you, Rabbi Chorny. Without wanting to lead the witness too much, is anyone willing to attempt to redeem this commentary, or not that it needs redemption, to tease out of it or pull out of it something that could be a light that lights our way? What about what he's saying could actually end up being a really significant way to organize our religious and spiritual life? I think there's something illustrative here and helpful. Anyone? If you had to write a sermon and this was your core text, what would it be? Ben's gonna give it a shot.
So I'm going to kind of tie Rashi in here a little bit, that this idea that, right, that was Rashi on Devarim, that these lighter commandments that may be really easy to just kind of tread over, those are the ones that Yaakov is holding on to and grasping onto and saying, sort of like what Rabbi Chorny was saying, I don't want just 10 of these. I want everything. I want this entire tradition that's being passed down to me. And so as the story goes on and we see wanting the birthright and all of that, it's saying, I don't want just part of my father's inheritance. I want the entire thing. I'll take all of it, no matter how difficult it is.
Lovely. So if I can rephrase what you said, Ben, I love it that this comment could be saying, I'm not jettisoning even the small things that when I do them as a Jew, the Christians think I'm ridiculous. Right? I'm even gonna do Hoshana Rabbah, and I'm gonna do Shatnez, and I'm gonna do the things that someone else could be very quick to be mizalzel. I'm going to hold that up as a centerpiece of what it means to Jew and follow God's law. Good. Anyone else want to try to read? I hadn't even thought about that as a read, so I like that. Anyone else want to raise it up? Sandra? Okay. Good. So Sandra, in case it wasn't audible on the screen, is focusing on his amplification of this achiza. The root aleph chet zayin is interesting. It could just mean to hold. It could be to grasp. It could also mean to claim, like an achuzah. In last week's parsha, achuzat kever was a permanent holding in a land where Sarah was being buried. So there's something deep that is established when you're ochez, and so she is seeing Rabbi Lichtenstein hold up not just living Torah but grasping Torah. I'll tell you what originally touched me about this text, which is really, I back created the text sheet. Oh, sorry, Henry. Thank you.
It's not going to directly relate to this exact text, but I've been thinking this whole time about another way to interpret the concept of grabbing onto the heel of the mitzvot. When you're standing up, you're firmest on the ground when your entire foot is on the ground, not just the ball of your feet, right? So the idea is you want your entire foot to be on the ground when you're dealing with this stuff, right? So that's another way to understand what they're talking about when they say the heel.
Good, Henry. Yes, Carmela?
Well, what I'm thinking is, with all this nice Torah and he's holding to everything and all this, what is happening now that the Democrat and half of the Jews are not
No. Carmela, we're not going there. We'll talk about that another time. Toda. Okay. We'll talk about that another time. I'll end the shiur in the following way. Microphone down. Put the candle back. Good. Okay. Anyone? Young Frankenstein? Okay. Here's what originally was stimulated for me when I read this commentary, and I kind of back engineered the text study from it. I think some of my most successful parenting moments are when one of my children complains to me about something that a sibling or a friend did to them, and they're hurt, and they're wounded, and they want me to do something about it. And I think I'm at my best when I tell them, this is wonderful, because you now have a very clear example of how you don't want to be seen by others, right? We are conditioned to try to heal and fix situations. When your child is wounded, you want to help them, right? And when I'm thinking clearly, when I'm parenting well, right, instead of trying to put the Band-Aid on the momentary wound, I'm trying to help them understand what is portable from this moment. And if this is the way that person made you feel, you have one more clear understanding of who you do and do not want to be. There's something about what Rabbi Lichtenstein wrote that is a little bit jingoistic, and I want to take it out of the realm of Christians are bad and Jews are good, of course, because there are plenty of good Christians and plenty of bad Jews. But I do hold up the idea of grasping in our minds, pun intended, the image of watching how others treat people and moments and rituals and laws that are easily overlooked, and being in tune with how we respond internally in those moments and emotionally, and say, I have a new task. I have a new inspiration. I have a new motivation, because I see what it looks like when that person treats that concept or that notion or that character trait in a mizalzel fashion. I now have an even greater obligation to be mechabed. Now, you can do that looking outside your religious tradition. You can do it looking inside your own minyan. I mean that very sincerely, right? Even in our wonderful community, right? We see people who are imperfect, as am I, handling a certain ritual moment, or religious moment, or ethical moment, or interrelational moment in a way that makes us so obvious to us. That person may not be a terrible person, but they're being mizalzel this. What's my obligation at that moment? To get in the way, to stop, to chastise? Rav Lichtenstein might say, no, to obligate yourself to a higher standard as a result. And that to me is a core idea of what it means to be a person on a spiritual path, on a constantly learning and ascending journey, and going to a place where we are grasping the things that most deserve to be grasped, sometimes in response to our observing others who are trampling it and them with our feet. And as descendants of Yaakov, we should be constantly on that pathway towards grasping the good and the right and the true and the loving. Shabbat Shalom. We'll say Kaddish Rabbanan, and then we'll go into do Birkat Hamazon, and then we'll go into Mariv. Kaddish Rabbanan can be found, I never remember the page in this. It's page 111 in the Lev Shalem. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yamad yivrach yerutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevorach le'olam le'omei maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudusha brichu. Leila min kol berchata v'shirata, dushbechata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'yamru amen. Al Yisrael v'al Rabbanan v'al Tamidehon, v'al kol Tamidehon, v'al kol man daskin b'araita, di v'yatra hadein v'di b'chol asar v'yatar. Yehei lahon ulchon shlama rabba, china v'chista v'rachamin, v'chayin arichin, v'zona revicha, ufor kana min kodam abu hondi v'shmaya v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim tovim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom romav, u'vrachamav yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Alan, do you have bread? Anyone have bread? Want to lead Birkat Hamazon? Anyone have bread? Henry? Okay. Henry will lead Birkat Hamazon, and then we'll go into Mariv. Where'd that microphone go?
They forgot to give us the booklet. You don't have
It's in the Siddur.
It's in the Siddur.
it doesn't matter. I know it by heart.
Yeah, you're right, you're right, you're right. I find the page.
In what? In the Lev Shalem?
Page 87.
I love you. So you
It's not in the Lev Shalem?
It is 87.
Oh, it's not in the Slim Shalom.
87 in left Shalom.
Yeah, it's on 337 in the Slim Shalem.
Good point. Shir hamalot beshuv Adonai et shivat Zion hayinu kechol mimaz yimales chok pinu uleshonenu rihina. Az yom ruva hagoyim higdil Adonai lasotim el higdil Adonai lasotimanu hayinu semechim. שוב אדוני את שבטנו כאפיקים בנגב, הזורים בדמעה ברינה יקצורו, הלוך ילכו בכו, נושא משך הזרע, בוא יבוא ברינה, נושא אלומותיו. חבריי נברך. יהי שם אדוני מברך מעתה ועד עולם, ברשות רבנן ורבנן ורבותיי, נברך אלוהינו שאכלנו משלום. ברוך אלוהינו שאכלנו משלום, טוב חיינו, ברוך וברוך שמו. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, הזן את העולם כולו בטובו, בחן בחסד וברחמים. הוא נותן לחם לכל בשר, כי לעולם חסדו וטובו הגדול. תמיד לא חסר לנו ואל יחסר לנו מזון לעולם ועד, בעבור שמו הגדול. כי הוא זן ומפרנס להכל, ומטיב להכל, ומכין מזון לכל בריאותיו אשר ברא. ברוך אתה אדוני, הזן את הכל. נודה לך אדוני אלוהינו רצונותינו. הכל, אלוהים רחמים לך ומרחים אותך, יתברך שמך בפיקוח חי תמיד לעולם ועד, כך כתוב, איך אתה ושבעת וברכת את אדוני אלוהיך על הארץ הדבר אשר נתן לך, ברוך אתה אדוני על הארץ ועל המזון, רחם אדוני אלוהים. ותצא אדוני אלוהים. ותצא ותצא אלוהים ותצא. ובני ירושלים ירקוש מהר רבינו, ברוך אתה אדוני בונה ברחם ירושלים, אמן. ברוך אתה מלך העולם, האלוהים מלכנו עד רבינו, ברינו לעולם ופרסם כאשר פרשו. הרחמנו מלך עלינו עולם ועד, הרחמנו יתברך בנו שמו בארץ, הרחמנו ישתבח לדור דורים, ויתפאר בנו לעד ולנצח נצחים, ויתהדר בנו לעד ולעולמי עולמים. הרחמנו פרסנו בכבוד, הרחמנו ישבור עלינו ועל צרינו וחלקנו ויוצרתנו, הרחמנו ישלח ברכה בבית הזה ובשולחן זה שאכלנו עליו, הרחמנו ישלח לנו את כל ימי זכרו טוב ובשרנו בשורות טובות, ישועות ונחמות, הרחמן. הוא יברך את כל המעשים מכאן, אותנו שלנו, כן יברך אותנו כולנו יחד בברכה שלמה ונאמר אמן. במרום ילמדו עליהם ועלינו זכות שתהי למשמרת שלום, ונישא ברכה מאת אדוני וצדקה מאלוהי שנו ונמצא ושכל טוב בעין אלוהים ואדם. הרחמן הוא יום שובו לשבת ומלכה לחיי עולמים. הרחמן הוא יברך את הרחמן הוא יזכנו למות משיח ולחיי העולם הבא. מגדול ישועות מעכו ועושה חסד למשיכו לדוד ולזרעו עד עולם. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. יראת אדוני כי דרשיו כי אין מחסור לבריאיו, כבישים ורב ותיקו תהיה לעולם חסדו ותח את ידך ומספרך הרצון. ברוך יהיה שבתך כבודו נפאר ודמתך ונערי תפגם זקנתי ולא ראיתי צחק נזר וזר ומבקש לכם אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. יישר כוח.
Mari for weekdays begins in Lev Shalem on page 264. If you're in the other two Sidurim, we're either on page 137 in weekday Sim Shalom, we're on page 200 in the full Sidor. Sim Shalom, does someone have the page in festivals and the in the 281? Wow, 4 whole page numbers called. But we're on 264 in Lev Shalom. We begin standing when we complete the Baruch Hu. You can be seated. Adonai Hoshea Melchianinu Vium Korenu. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamborach. Baruch Adonai Hamborach Leolam Ba'ed. Baruch Adonai. Living life, I'm of deal here. Living life, Adonai Tzvot Shemo El Chai V'Kayam Tamidim Lo Chalenu Leolam Ba'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Mariv Haravim. Yahavatakal Tasim Rimenu Leolam Mim Baruch Atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Adonai Elohechem Emet V'emunah Kosa V'kayam Lidu. Malchut Avratzon Gimel Elei Moshe V'nei Yisrael Echad Shira V'simcha Rabach Meruch Ulam Micha Mocha V'lim Adonai Micha Mocha Nedar B'Kodesh Norati Lo Tosef Elem Malchutecha Reuvanecha V'kayam Lifnei Moshe Seilianu V'yameru Adonai Himloch Leolam Ba'ed V'nehemar Givadai Adonai Et Yaakov V'gilam Yad Chazak Mimenu Baruch Atah Adonai Kol Yisrael Hashkinu Adonai. Vishmor Satan Uvainu Lechayim Shalom Yatavihat Olam Baruch Atah Adonai Shomer Ma Yisrael Lad. Hi malchut shelcha hi hulal miyat timloch b'chavod ki lanu melech elata. Baruch atah Adonai, HaMelech b'chvodav u'tzamid himloch aleinu le'olam va'ed v'el kol masav. Yitkadav v'yitkadash shemei rabbah. V'yamad yivrach Yerushalayim v'yamlich malchutei v'chaychon v'mechon v'chaydu kol beit Yisrael. V'galav izman karivim ru amen. Yishemi rabbah barach le'olam u'me'ameha. Yibarach v'yishavach v'yidbar v'yishamav v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal. Shemei tekudesha b'ri chulei lamin kol berchata v'shirata. Jishvachata v'nechamata damiram v'yamav imru amen. Whispered Amidah for the end of Shabbat begins on page 270 in Lev Shalom. If you're using a different Sidor, don't forget the special beginning paragraph of the middle brachot of the Amidah for the end of Shabbat.
If you haven't yet completed your own private Amidah, please continue at your own pace. Chatzi Kaddish, page 279. Ikatav, ikadash mirabah, v'yamat tivrach yirtev yamlich malchutei b'chayichon v'yamechon v'chayir chol beit Yisrael b'galach v'zman kariv yimru amen. Yishmi rabam v'rach le'lam hu'me'amaya yitbar rach v'yishwach v'yitbar v'yishma v'naseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalah shmei d'kudesh haberi chulei lamin kol berchatav v'shirata tush b'chatav v'nechmata tamiram p'yam havimru amen. We can be seated. We're in the middle of 279 in Lev Shalem. V'hinam Adonai Eloheinu aleinu ma'aseh yadeinu konena aleinu ma'aseh yadeinu konenehu yoshev v'seitam yiburu. Yikrei v'nehu imonochi v'tzarach ha'chalatzei v'yachidehu orchi mimasbihu v'yirei v'yishuati orchi mimasbihu v'yarehu v'yishuati. We turn back in our Siddur in Lev Shalem to page 216, the second paragraph on the page. V'yata kadosh yoshev tehilot Yisrael v'karas el ze v'amar kadosh 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 Adonai tzva'o malach la'aretz kavoto. V'tiseni ruach v'shma charai korah hashgadol baruch kavod Adonai b'mekom ha'adonai Adonai himloch le'olam v'yedon V'yivtechu v'chayirei shemechakilo azav tadori shecha Adonai Adonai chafetz leman tziko yagdil Torah v'yadir. Kaddish Shalem is back on page 280 in Lev Shalem. Ikatav, ikadash meirapah, v'yamati v'rach yirtev yamlich malchutei b'chayichon v'yamechon v'chayiduch b'eit Yisrael. B'galav v'zman karvivim ru'amein. Yishmi rabam v'rach le'lam hu'me'amaya yiparach v'yitramam. V'yitrar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalav shmei d'kudesh habarichu. Le'lam min kol berchata v'shirata. Shush b'chata v'nechomata tamiram pe'alma v'imru'amein. Tikabat saladon rojon t'chol Yisrael. Kadam havon divishmai havim ru'amein. Yishlam harabamin shmai v'choyim aleinu v'yokol Yisrael. Imru amen. Ose shalom imru yase shalom aleinu. Vil kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Aleinu 281. Aleinu l'shabei hachladon hakol. Kakativitor Takadonai Mlochlin Lamavin and Marvahaya Hadonai Lamelech Kol Haaretz. Bayom Hahui Adonai Echad Ushmo Echad. Mourner's Kaddish 282. Yit Gadal V'Yikadash Shemei Rabbah. V'Alma Divra Chirutei V'Amlich Malchutei. V'Chayichon V'Yomechon V'Chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael. V'Agala V'Zman Kari V'Imru Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah Mevarach Le'alam Ulamei Hamaya. Yitbarach V'Yishtabach V'Yitpa'ar V'Yitramam V'Yitnaseh. V'Yithadar V'Yitaleh V'Yitalal Shemei Dekudesha Berichu. Le'ela Minkol Birchata V'Shirata. Tush B'chata V'Nechamata. Damiran B'Alma V'Imru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabbah Min Shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'okol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'okol Yisrael v'imru amen. Yeshar koach to everybody who participated today, to Rabbi Kligfeld for teaching, and to everyone for being here and helping to make a minyan. A reminder that tomorrow morning, we have our Sunday morning minyan at 8 a.m. Tomorrow evening, we move to 4:30 in the afternoon for our daily minyan afternoon and evening services. Please be sure to join us whenever you can. It's a time of year that's difficult to make a minyan. In particular, our two hardest, historically speaking, our two most difficult days a year to make a minyan are Thanksgiving and Super Bowl Sunday. So please do your best to make it, if you can, this Thursday. Happy Thanksgiving if I don't see you before then. We're going to make Havdalah together. Perhaps Alan is ready to, as soon as I first light the match so I can see what I'm doing, and then he'll turn off the lights for us. And from your places, we can imagine being all close in together. And you'll sing along, and the back racks are busy lighting their candles on the screen, and we'll say goodbye to this week. Almost. Not yet. Not yet. I love how excited you are, though. You're ochezet, right? You're grasping it in your hand. Hey, Akev, hang on. I love it. We're doing it. Okay. Yanai, nanai, nai, 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 yanai, nanai, nai, yanai. Yanai, nanai, nai, 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 yanai, nai, nanai, nai, 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 hai, nanai, yanai, nai, nai. Yai nanai, yanai, nai, oh. Yai nanai, yanai, nai, nai. Yai nanai, yanai, nai, nai. Hine el Yeshuati, eftach v'lo evchan. Ki uzi v'zimarat ya, Adonai vayehi li lishua. Ushavtamayim besason, v'maynei Yeshua. L'Adonai Yeshua. Halamecha v'irchatecha selah, Adonai tzevaot imanu. Miskav lanu Elohei Yaakov Selah, Adonai tzevaot Asher Adam Boteach Bach, Adonai Yoshia, HaMelech Yaneinu Yom Koreinu, Lai Yehudim Ha'itorah, V'simcha v'sason v'ikar Kein tiye lanu Kos Yeshuot Esa Uv'shem Adonai Hekra Yain Anai Anai Nai Nai Yain Anai Anai Nai Nai Savri Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Peri hakafen Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei minei besamim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei ha'esh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or nechoshech ben Yisrael hamim ben yom hashvihi l'sheshet mei hamaseh. Baruch atah Adonai Hamavdil ben kodesh lechol Hamavdil ben kodesh lechol Chatoteinu hu imchol Zareinu lechaspeinu yarbe yarbe kacha v'hakochavim alayla. Zareinu lechaspeinu yarbe yarbe kacha v'hakochavim alayla. Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu. Eliyahu Hagiladi Bimhira V'yameinu Yavo Eleinu Mashiach ben David Mashiach ben David. Shavua Tov, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. I don't see you. And everybody have a nice evening. It's nice and early. Go out and have a nice night. Shabbat Tov, everybody there. Oh, come to the 1LA fundraiser. Come this evening. It starts at 7 p.m., right? Or 7:45 is Havdalah? Sorry, 6:45 is Havdalah. And then You can do it all over again because you can't miss the St. Brigid's Choir. You really can't. There's also Kayla, there's the big klezmer band, but like, let me just say, you cannot miss the St. Brigid's Choir. You don't have to go to church on Sunday morning in downtown LA to get them. They are unbelievable, and don't miss them. They're so, so good. So come to the field. It's worth it. There will be, I'm certain, heating lamps and all sorts of great stuff in the tent. So come. That's enough said. 7 o'clock, 6:45.
And $20.
I'm sorry, you're talking, Sarah.